shadow.
If you value quiet trespasses into forbidden rooms, stay to the final whisper and keep your hands inside the theater of night. Tonight, we don't chase jump scares. We lift a velvet curtain and let the dark move at its own pace. The question is simple, heavy as a stone idol under a wet cloth. What are the hidden rituals and secret cults of Lovecraft's mythos, and why do they act on you long after the credits end? Lovecraft did not invent fear of the dark. He tuned it like a flute in a room with no windows. He built a stage of paper and ink, Arkham's chilly stacks, Innsmouth's salted alleys, a swamp lit by drums in New Orleans, and then populated it with congregations that never needed your belief to be true. They only needed your attention. You will hear their steps before you see their masks. You will see their signs long after you look away. In his stories, cults are not color for the margins. They are the machinery. They move the curtain and align the lights. A ritual is a key and a gate, a sequence that unlocks a position in the cosmos, a posture that the universe recognizes. The idol is a prop, yes, but also an address. The words are lines in a script, but also coordinates. When an old sailor mutters a guttural phrase, he isn't pretending. He is dialing. There is a cost. Knowledge is a solvent as much as a lamp. You will see more, but fewer things will remain solid. The marsh will smell sweeter. The fog will taste like metal. Names you should not say will want to be said. The idea acts on you. The map starts to move the land. Consider the architecture of his approach. Where other writers thrust you into screaming chambers, Lovecraft builds his horror from the foundation up, brick by scholarly brick. His cults emerge not from sudden revelation, but from accumulated detail. A footnote here, a translation there, stones arranged in patterns that predate known civilizations. The terror grows in the spaces between facts, in implications that crawl between lines of seemingly academic prose. The genius lies in mundane persistence. His congregations possess the institutional weight of real organizations. The esoteric order of Dagon maintains meeting halls with regular hours. The Starry Wisdom Church keeps ledgers and correspondence. The Whateleys farm their land and pay taxes while conducting ceremonies that would unmake reality. The horror is not in their otherness, but in their ordinariness, their ability to function as both neighbors and conduits to cosmic indifference. The rituals themselves operate on disturbingly plausible principles. They require no magical thinking, only willingness to accept that consciousness might be more fragile than we assume, that reality might be more negotiable than we prefer. The chants work through psychological conditioning. The symbols function as mnemonic devices that train the mind to perceive patterns it was never meant to recognize. And always there is complicity. Lovecraft's narrators rarely stumble into these mysteries by accident. They seek them out, driven by curiosity they mistake for scholarship, by hunger for knowledge they convince themselves is academic. They open the books, trace the genealogies, follow the maps. They become archaeologists of their own damnation, methodically excavating the very foundations they stand upon. Before the first page turns, let us set terms. By cult, we mean a choreography of bodies, texts, and places that repeats until the world notices. By ritual, we mean the posture that makes the world able to notice you. Both are quieter than legends suggest. They live in dust and dusk, in salt on a threshold, in the way a curtain breathes when no window is open. You will not be chased. You will be arranged. The water remembers. The stones hold their positions. The words, once spoken, continue to resonate in frequencies below human hearing. This is the true horror. Not that they worship alien gods, but that they have learned to make themselves useful to forces that do not distinguish between worship and function. They have become instruments in an orchestra that plays music no human ear was designed to process. We will start with the frame, how Lovecraft forged a scholarly illusion, so convincing that readers still argue about sources that never existed. From there, we will follow the lineages, the transmissions through authors and forgeries, the practice of ritual as mechanism, how chants, angles, and bloodlines operate more like protocols than prayers. Then we will walk, slowly, through cases, a drumming swamp, a fish-gabled town, a barn with chalk circles, a church that harvests darkness. You will see the pantheon widen and the philosophy sharpen until the curtain touches you like a soft wave. The cult was never a group of robed figures. It was a structure. It was the audience. It was you. Listen. The drums under the floorboards are only the orchestra tuning. When they begin, you will know we have already paid to enter. Lovecraft's most dangerous invention is not a monster. It is a bibliography. He overlays fiction with fake scholarship so meticulously that the page becomes a paper altar. He supplies titles, editions, translators, and page numbers, and what looks like a footnote becomes a foothold. From that foothold, cults rise. Consider the Necronomicon, a word that refuses to behave like a word. It arrives already aged, written by Abdul al-Hazred, the mad Arab in Damascus, circa 700, rendered into Greek by Theodorus Philetus, burned by Patriarch Michael in 1050, translated into Latin by Olaus Wormius, suppressed by Pope Gregory IX, kept in fragments in the British Museum and Miskatonic University. Each citation is weather on the stone. When you read Miskatonic, you smell dust and leather. You believe. The idea believes you back. This scholarly varnish coats the cults. The Cthulhu cult in the swamps of Louisiana stands alongside Haitian rites and Polynesian survivals in the Call of Cthulhu, not to mock them, but to blend them into an archive. Inspect Inspector Legrasse's seized idol, greenish-black stone, squid head, bat wings. Feel the oil on your fingers. Hear Thurston's papers rustle as he traces a dream epidemic from Providence to Sydney to a ship called the Alert. This is not pure campfire. This is method. He references Fraser's The Golden Bough, nods to Margaret Murray's witch cult theories, and lets the reader's own anthropology do half the ritual. The genius lies in mundane accumulation. Real scholars debate manuscript variants, dispute authorship, argue over translation errors. Lovecraft replicates this scholarly ecology with surgical precision. His fictional texts arrive complete with publication histories, editorial controversies, institutional custody battles. The University of Buenos Aires holds a Necronomicon copy. Harvard's Widener Library restricts access to culte de ghouls. These institutions exist, lending weight to impossible books they supposedly house. In The Dunwich Horror, Yog-Sothoth is not introduced with thunder. He is footnoted by a family, the Whateleys, who walk out of a thin pamphlet from Arkham's Historical Society. The ritual circle in the barn is described with the blandness of a county survey. Stones, chalk, a book heavy as guilt. In The Haunter of the Dark, the Starry Wisdom Church is a ruin catalogued by tax maps and gossip. The shining trapezohedron sits in a tower like a paperweight waiting for your hand. The dread blooms because the voice sounds like a librarian. paper produces posture. Your shoulders hunch over the desk lamp. Your breath grows quiet in the dust. The ritual of reading arranges you in the pew before any chant begins. Leather bindings creak like old wood. Blue tobacco haze hangs like incense. A moth taps the lampshade like knuckles on confessional doors. The boundary between citation and summoning thins until a bibliography becomes an itinerary, a card catalog becomes a congregation, and he shares the method. Through letters to fellow writers, Howard, Smith, Derleth, he encourages a shared stage. Each adds a prop. August Derleth pins directions to Arkham and gives us unaussprechlichen Kulten through von Junst. Clark Ashton Smith supplies the Book of Ibon. Robert Bloch gives us Culte de Gaulle through the Marquis de l'Isle Adam. The bibliography grows, and with it, congregations. This collaborative expansion creates a feedback loop of fictional authority. When multiple authors reference the same invented text, it gains apparent independent existence. The Necronomicon appears in stories by different hands, each adding details that confirm the other's accounts. Readers encounter consistent descriptions across narratives, creating documentary illusion. The fictional bibliography becomes self-validating, each citation strengthening the others like voices in a choir confirming terrible truths. The psychological mechanism operates through trust in institutional knowledge. Libraries represent safety, scholarship suggests rationality. Footnotes imply verification. By mimicking these trusted formats, Lovecraft bypasses critical defenses. The reader's scholarly instincts become vulnerabilities, the very habits that make us good researchers. Following citations, checking sources, building comprehensive understanding become paths toward fictional infection. The cult is a study club with knives. The ritual is a citation that cuts you. When the paper altar is raised high enough, the congregation becomes indistinguishable from catalog cards. There is comfort here, a lamp, a note, a margin. There is also the first trap. Once you accept the format, the page as authority, the idea can enter you through the safest door you own. Fake scholarship breeds real behavior. Collectors write to librarians asking for the Necronomicon's call number. Tourists search Massachusetts maps for Arkham. Students annotate bogus citations as carefully as genuine ones. Game tables turn invented grimoires into rule-bound rites with dice as oracles. The contagion prefers institutions because institutions amplify posture. A library seal is a sigil. A reading room slip is a passphrase. A restricted stack stamp is a priest's hand on your shoulder. The curtain does not fall between scholarship and superstition. It folds. In that fold, ritual is born. And in that fold, we step to the next layer, how these paper altars breed, translate, and travel even when the lights go out. Transmission is the secret bloodstream of the mythos. What you think of as lore behaves like a contagion that prefers indexes to veins. A chant survives best when miscopied. A sigil grows stronger when traced badly by a trembling hand in a damp cellar. The idea wants friction. It wants breath. The books form one lineage. The Necronomicon, the Pentateuch manuscripts, the Book of Ibon, Cultes de Gaulle, unaussprechlichen Kulten. These are less texts than engines. Each is said to exist in a handful of places, and that scarcity is the fuse. The Miskatonic copy is chained in the restricted stacks the way a saint's bone is kept behind glass. Meanwhile, forgeries multiply. The scarcity breeds hunger. Hunger breeds ritual. Consider the economics of forbidden knowledge. A binder in Buenos Aires gold stamps a spine with invented dates. A college press in Prague prints 6 copies at midnight, each slightly different. A coastal occultist rubs lampblack into blank pages and calls them recovered leaves. The forgeries do not diminish the original's power. They amplify it. Each fake creates another vector, another pathway for the idea to travel. The market for impossible books generates its own supply, and that supply carries the same essential payload wrapped in different paper. Translations are metamorphoses, Arabic into Greek, into Latin, into vernaculars. Each stage strips and accretes meaning, the way a coastline erodes and gains. The chant, Funglui mglunaf, Cthulhu relie, wagahnagl ftagn, sounds like nonsense until the mouth finds its rhythm. Then it becomes breath work. You feel your chest change shape. The phrase teaches you how to say it. Each translator adds their cultural assumptions, their theological prejudices. Von Junst's German becomes Derleth's English, Alhazred's Arabic becomes Wormius's Latin. Copyists argue over a guttural that should be a hiss. Printers drop accents. A scribe's sleepy flourish becomes a permanent hook. Errors calcify into variants, and variants become dialects, and dialects become passwords that admit different rooms under the same house. The meaning shifts like sand through fingers, yet something essential persists. Not the words, but the posture they induce. But texts are only half the river. Dreams carry cults where paper cannot. Cthulhu reaches through fevered sleep, distributing an agenda to sculptors and drunkards and seamen who share no language. The whisper is a transmitter. The skull is the receiver. In The Call of Cthulhu, Thurston maps this as if it were an outbreak. It is. The vector is imagination, which science has always struggled to quarantine. The dream transmission operates below conscious awareness. Artists wake with salt on their tongues and shapes under their nails. Musicians compose melodies that hurt to hear. Writers pen verses in languages they do not recognize. The infection spreads through creative impulse, using inspiration as its vehicle. What feels like divine visitation is actually parasitic instruction. Sleep becomes a broadcasting frequency where barriers weaken and the dreaming mind accepts impossibilities that daylight would reject. The other carriers are places. Water remembers. The ocean is a library that shelves its books in pressure and current. In Innsmouth, the esoteric order of Dagon uses a meeting hall like a mouth within the town's mouth, inhaling tithes and exhaling fish gold. In Kingsport, the cliff road to the strange church in the festival is not a road. It is a ritual, a procession aligning bodies to coastline, cliffs to stars. In Red Hook, dank basements and bricked wells are little lungs. The dark breathes. Geography becomes theology. Stone holds impressions longer than flesh. Wood absorbs whispers and releases them slowly. Metal conducts more than electricity. It conducts intention. The cultists choose their meeting places not for convenience, but for resonance, seeking locations where the boundary between dimensions has worn thin through use, where repeated pressure from both sides has weakened the walls between worlds. Finally, there are bodies that choose to be conduits. The Whateleys arrange themselves, father and son and goat and door, so that a syllable can pass from outside to inside. Keziah Mason runs a fingertip along an angle that does not exist on our plane and is rewarded with Brown Jenkin and a set of coordinates. The starry wisdom faithful place the shining trapezohedron between themselves and the city like a pupil dilating. Human transmission requires preparation. Fasting weakens physical barriers. Meditation opens psychic channels. Repetitive chanting alters brainwave patterns. The cultist becomes a living antenna, tuned to frequencies that ordinary consciousness filters out. They sacrifice individual agency to become vessels for collective purpose, their very flesh becoming a compass for impossible directions. Every lineage has its apocrypha, weird tales issues passed from hand to hand, post-war paperbacks that turned Cthulhu into an odd parlor word, later role-playing manuals that formalized sigils into rules, comics smuggled glyphs into frames where only frame-by-frame priests would notice. Metal bands sang phonetics that taught thousands to breathe in time. Some transmissions cheapen, others concentrate. The idea does not care. It uses everything. It prefers the gutter when the library closes. The idea is promiscuous. It wants to be misheard so it can travel as rumor. It wants to be mocked so it can hide in jokes repeated without suspicion. A meme carries a symbol like a seed in a gull's gut. A forum thread becomes a grimoire, updated hourly, edited by insomnia. The democratization of terror spreads the payload through new channels, each adaptation preserving some essential, dangerous core. The river merges just ahead with the mechanism of ritual. The ink lines will become chalk circles. The breath will become syllables. The places will become stages, the bodies, props. The curtain is drawn, the orchestra tuned, the audience seated in their own skulls. The next movement is practical. A ritual in Lovecraft is not a prayer, it is an alignment. Think of it as an address, a way to become findable in a cosmos that does not care where you are. The ingredients are consistent: geometry, language, sacrifice, time. The product is contact, not communication. Contact, like a bruise. Geometry first. Angles that disobey Euclid act like doors. Keziah Mason discovers this when she draws lines in a Salem cell that refuse to stay on the wall. The Dunwich Circle is a chalk diagram inscribed in a barn that has seen births and breedings. It formalizes the obscene into a clean shape. Stone circles on hills are stage lighting rigs built by goatherds and astronomers who forgot the difference between their trades. In The Festival, the procession down the cliff path produces a human braid that mirrors the rock strata. A braid is a structure. Structures can be lifted. The geometry is not symbolic. It is functional. A pentagram drawn in chalk operates like a tuning fork struck against reality's edge. The angles create interference patterns in space-time, generating standing waves where impossible things can momentarily stabilize. The cultists do not worship the shapes. They use them as tools, the way a carpenter uses a level or a musician uses pitch pipes. The horror lies in discovering that reality has joints, hinges, places where it can be pried open with sufficient leverage in the correct application of mathematical force. Language is not content, it is frequency. The Arlahian chant is a metronome that slows your breath until you match a pressure system 5 miles down in the Pacific. Yog-Sothoth is the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the key and the guardian of the gate. The sentence is a paradox pair and a password. Say it, and the idea receives you and receives itself through you. The name is the blade and the sheath. Words in ritual context become vibrational keys. The throat is a wind instrument, the skull a resonating chamber. Consonants create friction. Vowels shape cavities. The cultist learns to speak with their entire torso. Feeling syllables rearrange their ribs. Ancient languages work best because they carry no modern associations, no comfortable meanings to blunt their edge. The sounds bypass conscious interpretation, and act directly on nervous system, glandular response, the involuntary muscles that control breathing and circulation. Sacrifice is misunderstood if you look for blood first. Yes, there are offerings. The Bay at Innsmouth knows the difference between a fish and a daughter. But the deeper price is behavioral, secrecy, isolation, obedience. You give up being knowable by your neighbors. You agree to be furniture in a room only the cult understands. You become an object on the stage, not an actor. Agency flips. The sacrifice of selfhood is gradual and voluntary. First, you agree to keep certain knowledge private. Then you modify your schedule to accommodate meetings. Your sleep patterns shift to match the group's rhythm. Your vocabulary changes as you adopt specialized terms. Friends notice you differently, sense barriers they cannot name. The isolation deepens not through rejection, but through growing incompatibility. You begin to see ordinary life as a performance you no longer wish to maintain. Time is the cruelest component when the stars are right. The phrase does not only mean astrology, it means patience. The ritual repeats in vain until repetition becomes its true function. The cult learns to live inside the rehearsal. The drums in the swamp are both signal and pastime. The wait is the worship. Temporal alignment requires astronomical precision and psychological endurance. The cultists must maintain readiness across decades, passing knowledge from generation to generation like a relay race where the baton never quite reaches the next runner. Children grow up in the shadow of eventual purpose. Adults spend lifetimes preparing for events they may never witness. The ritual calendar becomes more real than the civic one. Placed together, angles, words, price, patience, the rite arranges human matter to catch an inhuman wind. If it works, contact is not guaranteed to resemble a miracle. In the Dunwich Horror, contact produces the unwanted second child, a swelling absence that throws cattle against walls. In The Haunter of the Dark, contact is a blackout. The shining trapezohedron opens a channel to something that hates light. The city learns what candles cost. Success manifests as disruption rather than blessing. The entities that respond to ritual summons arrive not as allies, but as weather systems, indifferent to human welfare. They possess no malice because they possess no awareness of human categories. A successful ritual creates a temporary breach in the membrane between dimensions, allowing forces to leak through that operate by laws incompatible with local physics. Mechanics also include contamination. A failed rite can be as dangerous as a perfect one because it leaves residue. A chalk circle partially washed by rain still persuades the ground to remember a pressure. A mispronounced syllable still instructs your tongue to like the taste of the mistake. The rites want to be repeated. The idea rehearses you. We will carry these components forward into particular cases. In the swamp, you will hear geometry become dance. By the harbor, you will watch patience become marriage. In the barn, you will watch language deform livestock. In the church, you will see light become prey. The orchestra has moved from tuning to motif. The theme is established. The first case strikes a drum. The Call of Cthulhu is a file folder that found a heartbeat. It opens with a death and closes with a map heavy with salt. Between, the cult emerges in fragments. A statuette drowned in oil, a swamp thick with moss and mosquitoes, a ship nailed with barnacles, dreams slick with squid ink and stars. Inspector Legrasse raids a ritual outside New Orleans and finds a congregation with faces painted the color of tide pools. He describes drums and a chant and the idol they worship, a small Cthulhu, cold as iron, slick like stone pulled from depth. They dance in the geometry of the clearing, circles layered on circles, bodies forming a lens. The sacrifice is rumored, rarely shown. What matters is the alignment. Marsh low, moon high, reeds whispering like paper. The swamp ritual demonstrates geometry as living architecture. The cultists arrange themselves in sympathetic resonance with cosmic patterns, their circular dance creating a human mandala that mirrors dimensional relationships existing perpendicular to ordinary space. The drums provide temporal scaffolding, beating in rhythms that synchronize with deep ocean currents, the tidal breathing of something vast beneath the waves. Each body becomes a coordinate in a larger equation, flesh describing mathematical relationships that bend local reality. Elsewhere, on a studio table, sculptor Henry Wilcox, feverish, sculpts what he dreams. His fingers, not his beliefs, remember. In Oslo, an artist goes mad. In Dunedin, a sailor swears the sea spoke. Thurston gathers these as one would gather newspaper clippings after a storm. He traces a pattern through time, a surge of dreams, a tremor, a ship finding an island that should not be. Relia, green stone and wrong angles rising like a city that misheard gravity. The dream epidemic spreads through creative minds because artists possess neurological flexibility to receive impossible transmissions. Their training in visualization makes them ideal antennae for signals from dimensions where causality flows backward. They wake with their hands moving before consciousness catches up, producing artifacts that serve as relay stations. The global dream network operates like a vast nervous system, with Cthulhu's sleeping mind broadcasting not words but pure sensation through the collective unconscious. When the Alert's crew reaches that island, the ritual in the swamp finds its echo in basalt. Doors that are not doors, steps that are not stairs. The dead city is a geometry machine, passively waiting for alignment. They pry, they open. The gate is the city. The key is unfortunate hands. The thing that wakes is not evil in the human sense. It is enormous intent. It moves the way a tide moves, flattening categories. Faith, fear, bone. Relier demonstrates architecture as ritual technology. The non-Euclidean geometry creates persistent distortions in space-time, maintaining a pocket where entities from other dimensions can temporarily manifest. The buildings serve as stabilizing infrastructure, their arrangement encoding mathematical relationships that bend reality through purely structural means. The sailors become unwitting stage hands, their exploration completing a circuit that has waited millennia for the precise pressure of curious hands. Notice the economics. The cult is international and poor. It survives in swamps and docks, among sailors and outcasts. Lovecraft, tangled in his own prejudices, treats this with the gaze of a collector, but the mechanism is clear. The ritual requires persistence, not fine robes. Mud is an instrument. Tar is a candle. The idol is transported like contraband and adored like food. The cult's marginality becomes camouflage. Wealth creates visibility in records. Poverty moves through society's blind spots. The dispossessed gather in places authorities prefer to ignore, their desperation becoming fuel for transformation. They have little to lose from contact with forces that promise to overturn the existing order. Their offerings are meager but heartfelt, lives of quiet devotion, the rhythmic pounding of drums in forgotten places, and the language. Punglui magluwanuf, Cthulhu relia wagah nagalftakn. The chant becomes a passport, stamped in dream and water. You hear it once and find your tongue pushing into unfamiliar caverns. The throat remembers. It is a sonic sigil. It marks you as someone who can be found in the dream net when the stars shift. The Arlayahayan phrase functions as both invocation and identification. Speaking, it requires specific muscular configurations, breathing patterns, tonal relationships. The act of pronunciation physically alters the speaker, creating neural pathways that remain active long after the words fade. The chant installs itself like linguistic malware, waiting for activation signals from sources beyond normal sensory range. The contact nearly happens at scale. A city coughs in its sleep. A god rolls over. The world survives because alignment is fragile. The cult fails, or rather, succeeds in showing the cost of success. A handful of sailors die making a hinge. An artist dies hearing a door close. A clerk dies finishing a file. Perfect alignment requires coordination across multiple variables: astronomical positioning, geological stability, human consciousness, dimensional membrane permeability. Any disruption breaks the chain. The sailors' deaths serve as circuit breakers, their mortality absorbing energies that would otherwise complete the connection. Even Thurston's investigation becomes ritual participation, his scholarly research following the same obsessive patterns as cultist devotion. The drum we started with continues, softer now, but closer to your floorboards. Ahead, a town that made the ritual part of its economy, its mating, its masks. The swamp was rehearsal. The sea is the stage. Innsmouth smells of salt and varnish. The esoteric order of Dagon meets in a hall with shutters always half closed, as if the room squints at daylight. This is not a fringe. This is civic. The cult holds the keys to the refinery, the fishing fleet, the town's throat. The idol here is a tally: fish, gold, pearls, marriages. The shadow over Innsmouth is a socio-economic ritual. Captain Obed Marsh returns from the South Seas with a pact. He brings back a story of islanders who marry the deep and receive fish like manna. He brings back a rite: lamps dimmed, hymnals gone silent, a new chant under the breath. He brings back prosperity, then drought, then an ultimatum. The ocean is a god with strong opinions about reciprocity. The transformation begins with economics before it touches theology. Marsh's initial success creates dependency. The town grows fat on impossible catches, golden jewelry from depths that should hold only darkness. The prosperity becomes addiction. A quarterly earnings report measured in fish gold, where the dividends are paid in genetic alteration. When the fish stop coming, when the gold tarnishes, when the wells run dry, the town faces a choice between starvation and submission. The pact reveals its true terms only after the signatures have dried in brine. The order's ritual centers on fertility. Shub-Niggurath's 1,000 young is not invoked, but the logic is her logic: multiplication, intermingling, the horror of abundance. The deep ones are not ghosts, they are a demographic. The cult sacrifice is not singular, but ongoing. Daughters married to water, sons who grow gills, families who learn to speak through teeth that never stop growing. The mask is literal. Those Innsmouth faces are not metaphors. This fertility is a horror of replacement, a slow, inevitable erasure of the human by the aquatic. Each generation produces more hybrid offspring, their human features slowly dissolving into amphibian approximations according to genetic programming that follows Mendelian principles, dominant traits expressing themselves in gills, scales, and an irresistible pull toward deep water. The town becomes a breeding program disguised as a community, its citizens both performers and props in a biological contract that measures success in scales per capita. But it is the architecture that instructs. The reef at Devil Reef is a stage built to tidal schedule. The processions leave by moonlight. The ocean admits them. The esoteric Orders Hall is a prop room. Carvings of bass reliefs, a smell of old rope and brine, coins with fished scales pressed into their faces. To walk there is to walk through a ritual, even when nothing happens. Every building participates in the performance. Streets slope toward the harbor like water seeking its level, their warped clapboard and eelgrass piles creating processional paths. The refinery's chimneys are organ pipes, exhaling a tarry hymn that mixes commerce and covenant like ropes on the dock. Windows face inward, away from the sea's horizon, forcing the town to contemplate its own transformation. Doorways are built low, requiring visitors to bow. The wharf extends into deep water like a tongue tasting the abyss, while boarded windows glitter faintly with fish scale dust that catches lamplight like scattered coins. The narrator's tour is your tour. You peer into shops with shuttered windows. You listen for whispers that interpret prayers as business deals. The Gilman House is both hotel and mask shop, its key turning like the first note of a drum. When the chase begins, shoes on wooden stairs, fog pooling in alleys, you feel the ritual flip. Observation was safe because you were not yet an object. Now the cult is trying to file you into the ledger, a misfiled entry that must be corrected. Your breath, your feet, the fog is a clerk, and you are paperwork. The pursuit transforms tourism into initiation. What began as anthropological curiosity becomes existential emergency. The theater narrowing to a stairwell, a sash window, a roofline with shingles like scales. The fog that rises from the harbor carries more than moisture. It carries the town's collective breath, thick with salt, and the exhalations of things that have learned to breathe water. Your footfalls are entered, your silhouette cross-checked against lamp glow, your presence balanced against a very old balance sheet, where the overhead is human. Lovecraft makes the twist inevitable. The narrator is of Innsmouth. The bloodline is the deepest mask. You can flee the town, but you cannot flee the ritual if it has married your marrow. This is the cult's greatest technology, heredity as contract. The worship spreads through chromosomes, not pamphlets. The sea is patient. The stars set slowly. The gate and key are in your face. The genealogical revelation recontextualizes everything that came before. The narrator's fascination was not scholarly interest, but genetic homing instinct. His ability to perceive truth reflecting inherited sensitivity to underwater frequencies. The escape becomes circular, fleeing toward a destiny encoded in DNA, written in the shape of skull and the length of fingers, the way eyes reflect light. You realize that your very biology is a binding agreement, a contract signed by ancestors who traded human futures for fish gold present. Open loops close. The swamp's drums become the harbor's bells. The idol becomes a reef. The chant becomes a surname murmured in sleep when the window opens to kelp-scented air, and yet the mechanism is the same. Alignment, breath, price, time. The town's future is not in the courthouse, but offshore, in cities beneath the waves where biology serves better than theology, where time and genetics are the most reliable allies. As the last train leaves, you have already promised to return. The ritual operates through generational patience, each marriage contract extending the timeline another 20 years, each birth adding coordinates to the pattern. The deep ones wait, knowing that the sea remembers what the land forgets, that tides are more punctual than prayers. Ahead, a barn, a chalk circle, a family that uses language to do what Innsmouth did with blood. Dunwich is dry where Innsmouth was wet. The air tastes like iron filings. The Whately farm stands on a hill that seems too eager to be alone. In the barn, a circle of chalk, symbols that refuse to match any alphabet, and a book that sits like a sleeping animal. The ritual here is procedural. It follows the manual, because the manual wrote the family. Old Wizard Whately is a priest of pragmatism. He trades cattle for pages. He teaches his strange grandson a liturgy of angles and sounds. He turns a livestock barn into a laboratory, a theater where the stagehands are goats. Yog Sothoth is the gate. In the Whately's mouths, the paradox becomes engineering. The gate is not metaphor. It is the event that happens when the human vocal tract and a chalk circle align at the rate of a particular star. The Whately approach strips mysticism from the occult, revealing ritual as applied mathematics with biological components. The old man maintains detailed records, weather patterns, astronomical observations, livestock inventory, dimensional breach duration. His notebooks read like lab reports crossed with farmers' almanacs. Each ritual attempt is logged with variables noted, outcomes measured, adjustments calculated for the next iteration. The barn becomes a testing facility where hypotheses are verified through repeated experimentation, success measured not in spiritual transcendence, but in measurable contact with extra-dimensional entities. The book itself is less grimoire than technical manual. Its pages contain not incantations for divine favor, but schematics for cosmic breaches. The symbols are equations. The language is instructional, a series of steps to achieve a specific, horrifying outcome. What looks like poverty is logistics. Crates marked in chalk, almanacs open to write ascensions, weather tables thumbed until the corners turn brown. Every trip to the village for salt and kerosene is also an errand for the unspeakable. Wilbur Whately's growth is a ritual outcome as much as a character trait. He is a data point, unnatural size, accelerated learning, privacy fetish. The twin born unseen is the real experiment, a contact result that lacks a skin any town would honor, invisible, huge, hungry. The family supplies cattle as sacrament. The hills wear hoof prints like mantras. The children represent different approaches to dimensional hybridization. Wilbur functions as interface, retaining enough human characteristics to operate in normal society while serving as conduit for otherworldly intelligence. His rapid development follows programmed parameters, each growth spurt corresponding to ritual milestones. The invisible twin represents pure contact outcome, an entity too alien for local reality to process visually. Its hunger drives the family's agricultural operations, transforming cattle ranching into a feeding schedule for something that exists partially outside normal space-time. Miskatonic University functions as counter-ritual. Dr. Armitage is not a wizard so much as a librarian with excellent timing. He reads the same books with different intentions. The climactic banishment is a ritual as well. Words thrown like nets, Latin as disinfectant. Even the powder that reveals the monster's outline is a rite, a way to force the invisible to admit its edges. Academic opposition employs identical methodology with reversed goals. Armitage's research follows the same scholarly protocols as Whately's experiments, but aims at containment rather than contact. His Latin incantations operate on the same vibrational principles as Arleahian chants, using linguistic structures to impose dimensional boundaries. The revealing powder functions as technological ritual, forcing extra-dimensional matter to interact with local physics through chemical intervention. Scholarship becomes defensive magic, with footnotes serving as protective circles and peer review as exorcism protocol. But the deeper lesson hides in the chant. Yog Sothoth, as described in fragments and inferences, is not a personage but a structure, the key and the gate, the all-in-one and one-in-all, the totality of space-time that nevertheless permits edges to be grasped by syllable. When the Whateleys speak, they test whether language can be architecture. Sometimes it can. Sometimes the door opens into the house. The entity reveals itself as principle rather than personality, a fundamental property of reality that can be accessed through precise manipulation of consciousness and geometry. The paradox of being simultaneously key and gate reflects the non-dual nature of dimensional boundaries from perspectives that exist outside linear time. Language becomes architectural tool, syllables functioning as structural elements in constructions that exist primarily in conceptual space, but generate effects in physical dimensions. There is little romance here. The barn stinks, the chalk smears, the cattle scream. The ritual is ugly work, mundane, iterative, boring, and then catastrophic. This is why it fascinates. It shows the occult as logistics. Crates, ledgers, almanacs, weather tables. The cult succeeds by persisting. It fails by being seen. The horror lies in bureaucratic persistence rather than dramatic revelation. Success requires decades of methodical preparation, careful resource management, precise timing coordination. The Whateleys maintain supply chains for ritual materials, coordinate feeding schedules with astronomical events, balance secrecy requirements against operational necessities. Their failure stems not from moral weakness, but from logistical exposure, the inevitable visibility that comes with scaling operations beyond family capacity. The circle still chalks itself on the floor of the narrative even after the creature is dispersed. Contact leaves residue. The farm is a landmark now, a place that instructs angles to misbehave. The librarian returns to his stacks with the smell of goats still in his coat. The book sleeps, but lightly. Dimensional contact creates permanent alterations in local space-time geometry. The barn remains a weak point where reality admits unusual possibilities, its angles retaining memory of forced distortions. Even scholarly opposition carries contamination, with researchers inevitably absorbing traces of the forces they study. The Necronomicon returns to dormancy rather than destruction, its dangerous knowledge merely suppressed until circumstances again favor activation. Ahead, a church that trades stained glass for black glass, a city that learns to fear its own street lamps, and a messenger that prefers masks. On Federal Hill in Providence, the Starry Wisdom Church keeps darkness like a reliquary. Its pastor, Reverend Thomas, left a congregation and found a cult. He replaced the language of confession with an object, the shining trapezohedron. The stone is not polished to beauty. It is polished to precision. It eats light. Robert Blake ascends the tower, a moth courting a black star. He finds boxes of papers, a smell of mice and old incense, relics of a congregation that dissolved into rumor. The trapezohedron waits on a plinth like an unblinking eye. When he stares, the city changes, lights falter. There is a skitter on the edges of vision, a geometry of fear. He leaves, he writes. Then something looks back through the sentence. The urban ritual operates through infrastructure rather than isolation. Where swamp cults gather in clearings and barn cults hide in livestock sheds, city cults exploit the grid itself. Electrical systems become nervous systems. Streetlights transform into synapses that can be selectively darkened. The church tower functions as transmission hub, broadcasting influences that travel through shadow rather than spectrum. Blake's investigation completes circuits laid down by previous congregations, his attention serving as the final switch. The starry wisdom movement spreads like dust. There are whispers of similar stones, similar cults. Chicago, New Orleans, Red Hook. Their rites are not elaborate. They are simple: darkness, solitude, focus. Like a camera, the stone requires a shutter. When a city suffers a blackout, the ritual scales. A congregation of millions involuntarily participates by losing their lamps. The haunter arrives where it is invited by absence. Urban darkness creates involuntary participation on massive scale. Every power outage becomes potential summoning circle. Every blackout, a citywide ritual conducted by unwilling congregants. Citizens who curse broken streetlights unknowingly contribute to ceremonies they would never consciously join. The horror lies in discovering that metropolitan infrastructure is itself ritual architecture designed to channel forces that predate electricity by eons. Nyarlathotep is the emissary who wears this logic best. He is not summoned like a king. He circulates like a story. Sometimes he appears as a pharaoh in a tattered robe, sometimes as a scientist with a box of wonders, sometimes as a whisper that convinces a congregation to turn off its lights. His 1,000 masks are not costumes, they are protocols. Each mask arranges an audience. The entity functions as adaptive interface, its manifestation calibrated to specific cultural contexts. The pharaoh mask appeals to Orientalist fantasies. The scientist mask exploits faith in technological progress. The whisper mask bypasses conscious resistance entirely. Each appearance is software update rather than incarnation, allowing the same fundamental intelligence to operate through whatever symbolic framework the target audience finds compelling. The horror at Red Hook shows urban rites in basements and bricked wells, nests of statuettes and beads and stale water. Joseph Kerwin, in the case of Charles Dexter Ward, is a bookkeeper of death, a necromancer who treats human bodies like ledgers. These are not Gothic in the clinical sense. They are administrative. Forms are filled, names recited, powders measured, and the dead are brought to heal. The ritual is paperwork that bites back. Metropolitan occultism adopts bureaucratic methodology, treating supernatural forces as regulatory compliance issues. Kerwin's necromancy operates through careful record-keeping, precise measurements, systematic cataloging. His resurrection procedures follow standardized protocols, each step documented for reproducibility. The horror emerges from methodical application of administrative principles to domains where such methods should not function. Notice the stage vocabulary: pulpits, towers, pews, ledgers, boxes, curtains of blackout drapes. The city itself becomes a theater where rituals are lighting cues. The shining trapezohedron turns the tower into a spotlight operator that prefers the light off. When the lamp dies, the curtain flutters. Urban architecture naturally creates theatrical spaces. Church towers function as fly galleries. Basement chambers serve as orchestra pits. Alleyways become wings where actors wait for cues. The electrical grid operates as lighting board, its switches controlling illumination across the entire stage. Rituals become performances scheduled according to power company maintenance, their timing coordinated with municipal blackout patterns. And the cost? Blake dies staring. He writes himself to death. The paper altar collapsing under the weight of an eye that refuses to blink. The starry wisdom faithful vanish into the alleys, not as martyrs, but as missing persons. This is not a grand guignol. It is an audit, and you are not prepared. The price operates through statistical rather than supernatural means, erasing participants through bureaucratic processes that leave no dramatic evidence, only empty apartments and unclaimed mail. Blake's death resembles occupational hazard more than heroic tragedy, his investigation consuming him through gradual exposure rather than sudden violence. We have seen the swamp, the port, the barn, the tower. We have breathed mud, salt, chalk, dust. One more piece remains. The witch's angle that does not add to 360 degrees, the procession that is also an inheritance. After that, the synthesis. After that, the audience finds its role. Keziah Mason writes, "With a needle on a wall no eye can read." In The Dreams in the Witch House, she discovers that an angle can be a staircase if you refuse it its sum. Walter Gilman moves into her room because rent is cheap and finds that rent is a ritual too, a price you pay until the structure owns you. He dreams, he calculates, he meets Brown Jenkin, a creature shaped like a rat and a joke, and a space beyond space where Azathoth pulses at the universe's orchestra pit. Flutes, blindness, a conductor who is the absence of a conductor. The witch's mathematics operate through architectural rebellion. Her needle scratches equations that violate Euclidean assumptions, creating formulae for spaces that fold back on themselves. The room becomes laboratory, where impossible geometry can be tested through lived experience. Gilman's academic training makes him ideal subject, his mathematical vocabulary providing terminology for phenomena that resist description. The rent arrangement transforms economic transaction into ritual contract, each monthly payment deepening his entanglement with forces that use buildings as instruments. The witch's Sabbath is not portrayed with capes and caverns, but with math. The sacrifice is an infant. The sin is a dissertation. Gilman's chalkboard is a gate, his heartbeat a metronome. He speaks numbers and finds they speak back in rat's feet and icy drafts. He dies with a line in his head. Academic research becomes involuntary invocation. Gilman's calculations accidentally reproduce Mason's dimensional formulae. His scholarly pursuit creating pathways for entities to manifest. The chalkboard serves as portal, its equations functioning as coordinates, mapping locations in hyperspace. Brown Jenkin represents materialization of mathematical concepts, living proof that consciousness can inhabit geometries existing perpendicular to normal space-time. The horror lies in discovering that advanced mathematics is ritual technology, that pursuing knowledge creates the very phenomena it seeks to understand. The festival breathes the same air differently. A letter arrives. A man visits Kingsport in winter. The town is a mask. He joins a procession, robes, cold breath, lanterns like captured moons, down a cliff path to a church that is older than the stone it sits on. There is a book on the altar and a body in the pit. The congregation's faces are not shown. The sea waits like a mouth that only opens for those who already belong. The winter ritual operates through atmospheric pressure and genealogical memory. Cold air carries scents and sounds that trigger inherited responses, activating neural pathways laid down by ancestral participation. The procession follows routes carved by centuries of similar gatherings, the path itself becoming ritual architecture. The church predates its own construction, existing as conceptual space that manifested in stone through repeated ceremonial attention. The horror lies in discovering that identity is genealogical function, that masks worn by ancestors become your own face. These rites are about inheritance. You are summoned not because you learned a chant, but because your name fits an old ledger. The witch's angle is an heirloom. The festival is a calendar harm. The geometry is folded into the family Bible, the procession into the blood. You do not choose your mask. Your mask chooses you and has for a century. Hereditary participation transforms ritual from voluntary practice into biological destiny. Family trees become organizational charts for supernatural entities, bloodlines serving as communication networks spanning generations. The inheritance operates through genetic memory, with ritual knowledge encoded in DNA rather than transmitted through teaching. Participation becomes inevitable once ancestry is established, the summons arriving through channels that predate conscious decision-making. The MyGo in The Whisperer in Darkness belong here too. They are extractive. They remove brains like librarians withdrawing fragile books, placing them in metal cylinders with dials that simulate sensation. It is a surgery and a sacrament. The hills of Vermont, fogged and wet, become an annex. Bodies are props. Voices are stage directions. The ritual is technological and no less sacred for wearing goggles. The fungoid entities represent ritual as biotechnology, their procedures combining surgical precision with ceremonial significance. Brain extraction serves dual purposes, preserving human consciousness for study, while creating portable vessels for interdimensional transport. The metal cylinders function as technological reliquaries, maintaining awareness through mechanical simulation of sensory input. Vermont's landscape becomes laboratory where organic and mechanical systems merge in service of entities whose science is indistinguishable from sacrament. We have reached the philosopher's isle in the archive. You have felt mud, salt, chalk, black glass, angles, and winter lanterns. The thread is not the monster. It is the structure. Cults are interfaces. Rituals are protocols. Entities are principles. The witch's line is not content. It is address. The procession is not fellowship. It is alignment. The brain in the cylinder is not a horror. It is an RSVP. This pattern emerges through accumulated examples. Each cult represents different interface designed for accessing identical underlying reality. Swamp drums, harbor bells, chalk circles, black stones, impossible angles, winter processions, extraction chambers, all serve as connection protocols for consciousness to interact with forces existing outside normal dimensional parameters. The entities function as principles rather than personalities, fundamental aspects of reality accessible through proper alignment of attention, geometry, and intention. The orchestra has finished its motifs. The conductor that does not exist has pointed at the audience. The curtain is not falling. It is breathable fabric. The synthesis waits like a door left unlocked on purpose. Here is the debt we owe the stage. We forgot we were on it. behind every cult scene, the most important object is the attention that arranges it. Lovecraft teaches a psychology of ritual long before any chorus says "Ea." Knowledge behaves like a contagion if you want it, and like a solvent if you doubt it. That is the paradox pair at the heart of his mythos: curiosity and cost. In anthropological terms, ritual consolidates uncertainty. It provides a script when the weather refuses to. Fraser and Murray, name-checked in The Call of Cthulhu, embody a scholarly hunger to find the same bones under every bonfire. Lovecraft mirrors this, but his twist is kinder and crueler. The ritual works not because it controls the cosmos, but because it controls the participants. The cosmos, indifferent, occasionally aligns out of habit. If you are standing where the wind blows once every 1,000 years, you learn to call that answer. The mechanism operates through expectation management rather than supernatural intervention. Ritual participants create meaning through synchronized behavior, their collective attention generating psychological effects they interpret as cosmic response. The chants are not commands, they are breathing exercises that synchronize nervous systems. The geometries are not prisons for entities. They are focusing devices that organize scattered awareness into coherent patterns. Psychologically, cults exploit pattern hunger and social isolation. Innsmouth offers belonging and wealth at the cost of daylight. Dunwich offers knowledge to a family living beyond laughter. Starry wisdom offers awe to men tired of pews. The power is placebo and poison. You feel agency returning, and it is. It returns just long enough to arrange you as a prop where a principle can act through you. Each cult addresses specific psychological deficits through structured participation. Isolation creates vulnerability to group belonging. Uncertainty makes people crave authoritative knowledge. Meaninglessness generates hunger for transcendent purpose. The horror lies not in the entities summoned, but in discovering how easily human consciousness can be reorganized around shared symbols and repeated actions. Modern echoes are everywhere because we have rebuilt the stage in light. Screens, feeds, algorithms that reward repetition. A meme is a sigil you didn't mean to draw. You see the yellow sign in a show you stream at 2 a.m. And though Hastur is not strictly Lovecraft, the principle holds. A symbol that organizes an audience organizes outcomes. True Detective whispers Carcosa, and we listen. RPG rulebooks formalize glyphs into steps and dice. ARGs turn sidewalks into treasure maps. None of these are cults in the sense of marsh drums and fish gold, yet all accept the mechanism. Attention aligns. Repetition summons. Masks multiply. The algorithm does not love you. It plays a flute without ears. Digital infrastructure replicates ritual mechanics through technological means. Social media platforms function as attention harvesting systems, using engagement algorithms to create repetitive behavioral patterns that mirror traditional ceremonial structures. The screen becomes altar. The feed becomes liturgy. The notification becomes summons. Your device glows like a modest trapezohedron, warm on the palms, humming with frequencies that synchronize your breathing to the rhythm of updates. Cosmology deepens the chill. Astrophysics tells us the universe is indifferent and mostly dark energy, a stage with no playwright. Quantum mechanics is a carnival of probabilities where observation changes outcomes. Ritual, then, is the folk physics of beings trapped in terrible light, trying to negotiate with a set of laws that does not include mercy. The comfort, it sometimes works. The horror, it works by changing you, not it. Scientific cosmology validates Lovecraft's central insight. Consciousness exists in a universe that operates according to principles indifferent to human welfare. Dark energy dominates cosmic expansion. Quantum uncertainty undermines deterministic causation. Observer effects suggest reality depends partially on measurement. Ritual emerges as psychological technology for managing existential anxiety through structured interaction with forces beyond human control. And so the self-implication tightens. You have been participating. By listening to the chant about chants, you have practiced breathing in sync with a set of ideas. The paper altar you rested your eyes on has your fingerprints. The meta-story lexicon, curtain, stage, audience was not flair. It was rehearsal language. You are seated where the gate opens, in your skull, in your lungs, at the end of your fingers where your device glows. The revelation becomes inescapable. Analysis of ritual mechanics constitutes ritual participation. Studying cult behavior creates the very patterns of attention and repetition that enable cult function. Every moment of sustained attention to these ideas has been a moment of alignment with the principles they describe. You have joined a congregation because you arrived. What to do with this knowledge? You do not need to flee the theater. You can remain seated, lights low, with your hand on the armrest and your name intact. Knowing the mechanism does not immunize you. It does something subtler. It returns decorum. You can choose which scripts to speak, which masks to try, which drums to ignore. That is not freedom. It is posture. It will be enough to bow and leave when the orchestra winds down. One last movement remains. The curtain must return to where it began, the idol under cloth, the promise under breath. We will let the whisper finish the work. We promised the idol, the cloth, the whisper. Lift it slowly. It is not the Cthulhu figure from a swamp. It is smaller, more ordinary, a book plate, a ring, a line you copied in a notebook at 14. These are the modern cult's portable props, and they live in daylight. The horror is not that they make you evil. The horror is that they make you legible. The contemporary ritual object hides in plain sight, masquerading as decoration or memorabilia. A poster on a dorm wall, a tattoo that seemed clever at 23, a username chosen for its obscure reference. These items perform the same function as ancient idols. They mark you as someone who recognizes certain symbols, who belongs to particular networks of meaning. They make you findable by others who share the vocabulary, readable by systems that catalog attention patterns. Entities are principles. We close by naming them that way. Cthulhu is pressure and depth and the dream net that attention forms over oceans and years. Dagon is economy and the fertility of bargains you cannot exit. Shub-Niggurath is abundance and the terror of multiplication beyond consent. Yog-Sothoth is connectivity, network, gate, key, guardian, embodied not as a face, but as a topology. Nyarlathotep is the protocol that translates between layers, the salesman of truths, the showman of voids. Azathoth is the orchestra pit, blind, idiot, central, surrounded by flutes that never rest, a metaphor that becomes physics if you stare at it long enough. Each entity represents fundamental aspects of existence that consciousness encounters when it expands beyond comfortable boundaries. Cthulhu embodies the psychological pressure of deep time and vast space, the weight of awareness that stretches beyond individual lifetime. Dagon manifests as economic entrapment, systems that grow through consumption until escape becomes impossible. Shub-Niggurath appears wherever abundance becomes horror, where multiplication exceeds control. Yog-Sothoth functions as connection itself, the network topology that enables information to flow between previously separate domains. It represents the gate and key paradox, the boundary that both separates and connects. Nyarlathotep operates as translation protocol, the interface that makes the incomprehensible temporarily accessible. Azathoth occupies the center as pure process without purpose, the generative chaos that produces order as accidental byproduct. Cults are arrangements of these principles in human rooms. A church is a router, a barn is a server rack, a procession is a sync event. We have been careful with metaphor because, like rites, metaphors do work. You can misuse them and call down nothing but your own reflection, or you can extend them until they behave like reality. Lovecraft's gift is to make the latter feel inevitable. The technological metaphors function because both technology and ritual serve identical purposes: organizing attention, synchronizing behavior, enabling communication between distributed systems. Religious architecture creates network topology for consciousness to connect across space and time. The horror lies in recognizing that human institutions already operate according to these principles, that the occult infrastructure hides in plain sight. The mask remains. We wore it together, scholarly, soothing, ominous. We made a stage of ink and whispered into its curtains. The cost was small and precise. A little sleep, a little innocence. The gain is small and precise. A language to name the gates when you see them disguised as hashtags, headlines, and heritage. You can pass them by, or you can bow. The shared performance created temporary congregation, our mutual attention forming the very phenomenon we studied. The documentary tone was itself ritual technology, the calm voice and careful pacing designed to bypass critical defenses. The knowledge gained is not information, but recognition, the ability to identify ritual mechanics operating through contemporary media, social networks, cultural institutions. The seed of the next widening is already germinating beneath your feet. We have talked of cults and rituals, human scale structures. The pantheon awaits with its 1,000 forms of Nyarlathotep and the lesser lights of Ling, Kadath, and Carcosa. There are masks that are not metaphors but meteorologies. We will need weather gear. For now, let the stage hands come out. They coil the ropes of mud and salt and chalk. They lower the black glass into its case. They erase the angles from the barn floor with water from a tin pail, chalk dissolving into pale rivulets. They carry the lanterns back up the cliff and hang them on hooks like moons asleep. The curtain moves. You can feel it brush your hand. It is not heavy. It is a veil. The void beyond it is not a threat. It is a room that does not care whether you enter. That indifference is the final gift. You may go. When the music stops, it does not stop. The flutes around Azathoth have no lungs and so never tire. We only step away from hearing them. That is the meaning of ending here, not a negation, but a change in seat. The theater remains, the stage is bare, the curtain breathes once and is still. You carry out what you brought in altered. The idol is smaller now because the room is larger. The cults of swamp, port, barn, church, and cliff have been folded into a single sheet, a map of protocols, not people. If you pressed your ear to it, you would hear drums, waves, hooves, rats' feet, and silence. If you folded it, the lines would cross where your thumb rests. That is where you will be found if you choose to be found. The transformation is subtle but permanent. What once seemed like discrete horror stories now reveals itself as a single system with multiple interfaces. The Louisiana swamp connects to the Massachusetts harbor through dream networks. The Vermont hills echo with frequencies that pulse beneath Dunwich barns. Each location represents a different method of accessing identical underlying principles, like radio stations broadcasting from the same tower on different frequencies. On the way out, the ushers, those quiet figures in robes that turned out to be librarians, nod once. They do not keep your name. They keep the air moving. Outside, the river is ordinary, the stairs are wood. The night smells of water and stars and the varnish of doors that have been closed for years. Nothing is urgent, everything is ready. The return to ordinary consciousness requires careful decompression. The ushers understand that transition is ritual too, that stepping from heightened awareness back into mundane reality needs guidance. They maintain the liminal space where transformation can settle, where new knowledge can integrate without overwhelming existing structures of meaning. The world outside is unchanged, but your ability to read its hidden patterns has been calibrated. We asked, what are the hidden rituals and secret cults of Lovecraft's mythos? We learned they are keys and gates, veils and voids. They are places and breaths. They are books that behave like rooms and rooms that behave like pages. Most of all, they are audiences arranged by ideas that act on them. The answer reveals itself as both simpler and more complex than expected. The rituals are not exotic ceremonies, but basic technologies of attention and repetition. The cults are not secret societies, but emergent properties of shared focus. The entities are not monsters, but principles of organization that consciousness encounters when it extends beyond comfortable boundaries. The horror lies not in what they do to us, but in discovering what we were already doing to ourselves. If you remain curious, the next curtain is not far. 1,000 masks wait in a trunk stamped with impossible stamps. Ling, Kadath, Ulthar, Delathleen, Carcosa. Nyarlathotep will be there, not as a villain, but as a verb. When you're ready, we will speak of messengers and message, of how gods become weather and weather becomes chant. Not tonight. Tonight, the ritual is ending in the only safe way it can, by refusing to insist. Step into the corridor. Take the cool handrail. Let the last flute note become the hum of your refrigerator. The darkness in your room is the same as it was an hour ago. The mask comes off without hurting. The audience, always you, chooses whether to applaud. The stage waits without expectation. The void does not notice, and that is the mercy. The transition guidance is precise and gentle. The handrail is real metal and wood, grounding consciousness in physical sensation. The refrigerator's mechanical hum replaces otherworldly music, domestic technology drowning out cosmic frequencies. Your room's familiar darkness reasserts its ordinary properties, becoming again simple absence of light rather than presence of infinite space. Walk past the coat rack, the exit sign that buzzes faintly like an insect trapped in glass. Smell the dust lifting where feet have been. Feel the small draft that lives in every stairwell, that old house breath the building cannot unlearn. Your hands remember the weight of the book, though you are not holding one. Your mouth remembers the pace of the chant, though you never spoke it aloud. This is the residue of attention, the chalk dust of thought on the cuffs of your ordinary jacket. It brushes away easily, and what will not brush away does not need to. The theater is not a trap. It is a room with many doors, and you have always had the keys. You can return to the street and call the night ordinary without line. Home has its own small rites. Keys on the dish, shoes by the mat, a light switched on and off again just to hear the click. Water from the tap, cold and clean, tastes like forgiveness. The refrigerator hums its indifferent hymn. Your room contains you without question. The walls do not ask for allegiance. And if, before sleep, a single note drifts in the air like a thread of flute, you will know it is only your own breath moving through the room you own. It will not ask for anything. It will accept the ceiling and the dark and the distance between them. It will lie down when you lie down. The flutes continue playing, but you are no longer required to dance.